Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unsubscribe, the Demand Drive podcast. I am your host, AJ Alonso, and today we've got 5 questions for Gautam Rishi. He's the co-founder over at OneShot.ai. But before we go ahead and turn it over to Gautam, he's going to talk about all things personalization, customization, relevance, anything that you have to do with outreach and prospecting on that side of things. I have to check in with Alex. I have to check in with him before every episode. I got to make sure he's doing okay, that he's going to be in for the ride on this one.
Yeah, so far I've been good every time, but you're just waiting for that one day when I'm just not having
One day
it,
you're
right?
going to crack, man. I know it. You're just, you know what? Today's not the day.
Well, today's not.
We can try and make it the day.
Oh, no.
We'll see. In like 8 minutes,
boy.
if he just signs off, you'll know why. But Alex is feeling good. I'm feeling good. Gautam, how are you feeling?
Feeling good. I'm in London. I've had some good meetings today. It's good just being out. I know everyone keeps going on like LinkedIn, like, oh my God, it's so good to be out in person doing real life meetings again. But, my entire background was in-person meetings. For the last 2 years, I've hardly done any. So it's just like exciting being on the train, meeting people, signing into offices. Yeah, I feel like a kid again.
It's funny, the little things where you're like, man, like 3 years ago, it's like my commute's terrible. I have to get on the train. It's crowded. Now you're like, I relish the thought of getting on public transit, and interacting with people. It's crazy.
Just talking to people. I was like, even the coffee guy at the train station, I talked to him about cricket, a very English sport, but I haven't talked to him about cricket. I've been getting the training quite a bit recently, so it's just good to interact with. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do it every day, but it's good.
Nice. Well, today we're going to be focusing on this idea of email personalization, prospecting personalization, making sure that your message as an SDR or AE, as some type of salesperson, is one-to-one, right? I think now we're living in this age where people are talking about personalize or die. If you get sent a generic message, it pops into your inbox, more than likely it's going to get deleted. There's a lot of chatter, a lot of discourse around what does this mean? How can I do it? What are some best practices? So I want to start the conversation off with some definitions. I think this is right up your alley, Gautam, in terms of what you're building there at OneShot. But to you, what does personalization mean? And what do you see most people try to define it as that might not kind of hit the mark?
Yeah. And I agree. Like, personalization is such a broad topic, and it means so many different things to so many different people. I guess even think about even before personalization, why are we even having a discussion on personalization? Is because and to the name of your podcast, Unsubscribe, responses are so hard to get these days. Open rates are so hard to get these days. And why is everyone talking about personalization? And what that means is because 5 years ago, not every single company was using a sequencing tool, an email sequencing tool. So 5 years ago, you could just by sending a multi-stage email was good enough. So you could create a 6-stage email sequence, and you would probably get, your response rate is probably 5 or 6%. And people were happy with that because you could probably do 2 hours a day and get a response. What's happened is SDR teams have become incredibly sophisticated in the last 5 years. The world has gone through this funding explosion. There's so many great companies out there with great products, and SDR has become a very it's become a proper job, right? Before, without disrespect, I used to be an SDR, so I'll be disrespectful.
Same.
Yeah, but people, it was companies used to be it's a low-cost role we can fill. We don't have to pay big enterprise AE sales salaries. And it was hey, we can just get them to cold call. But now it's become a really sophisticated, highly skilled job. There's multiple tools to use. There's different messaging. There's different personas. And the market's been flooded. So what's happening is, if you think about each prospect, before we go into personalization, think about someone you're prospecting. Chances are they're probably being prospected by 10 to 15 people that day.
Yeah, at least.
And if you think about how many connection requests they're getting, how many emails they're getting, how many cold calls, we work with a ton of security software companies, so many security software companies. So if you're trying to get through that, you have to personalize now, right? So just firstly, before we even get on to personalization, just think for a minute, how many messages is that person receiving that day? Assume 20 to 30 messages. So how are you going to stand out from 20 to 30 messages? And now we can kind of come on to personalization, what that means. So hi first name, hi like I see you work at company name, first name, account name, job title, industry, they are not personalization, right? That is just basic. You might be able to get some results through that, but you are talking 1%, half a percent response rate, right? How do we get to 2 or 3? This is personalization. Personalization can be as wide as, and again, I don't want, personalization should be quick. If you're spending more than 10 minutes on an email, you're spending too long. So how can you personalize in 10 minutes or less, 10, 15 minutes? So we can start looking at how we making, personalization, how we making this relevant to the person we're prospecting.
That's
so
key. Yeah.
That's the, like, it's relevancy, not personalization. So number of things here we can look at, break this into 2 areas: company-based personalization and person-based personalization. So those are the 2 things. Always think person-based is, you're always going to, like, you're limited to, most people, their social, their LinkedIn profile, right? You can go on their Twitter and like Facebook and Instagram.
It's a little weird, right? I had someone email me this morning saying, hey, I came across your Twitter profile. And I was like, so? Like, I haven't posted anything on Twitter in probably years at this point. Why are you checking out my Twitter profile? It's a little weird.
Yeah. So I think, like, prospect base, you're always, and it's always a bit cheesy, right? Even like, so let's assume 90% is done via LinkedIn. So what are you looking at? And everyone's the same. I'm going to look at, have you got anything in the social bio? What company do they work at? Do we have any mutual connections? I kind of like don't care if someone's like, oh, I see we have 35 people in common. I'm like, I just accept any invites. I don't know who these 35 people are. So like, it's a very like tenuous link if you're using those sorts of things. Is there some gold on someone's LinkedIn profile? Absolutely, right? Because there may be like, so if how I would use prospect-based, person-based, is if there is a recommendation on that person, mention that recommendation name. So it's like, oh, I just read your profile. So Alex said these great things about you as a sales leader. These 2 or 3 things, not you, AJ, someone else. And then never, no. But, you know, just how can I take that recommendation? You've 2 levels of personalization. One is you've mentioned someone's name they know. The second is you've referenced actually the recommendation. That takes 30 seconds to do, 40 seconds to do. They may have something interesting in their social bio that you can use. Like, hey, you know, if I'm talking about someone in software, I just completed a complex project where we did the digital transformation for Walmart. It took 5 years and I had 300 people working in that team. Yeah, that's quite cool. I'm quite interested. But hey, I just saw like from your social that you've deployed this. How am I going to make that relevant? So digital transformation, 300 people. How am I going to bring that into place? It's like, hey, Alex, I saw you managed 300 people during the digital transformation. I assume some of the challenges there were, you know, keeping people motivated, keeping the project on time. How did you find it? So I'm trying to bring this into a real world conversation, right? So that's specifically person-based. So like, what can I find on their bio, companies, and how can I link that back to my product or service without it sounding terrible? You can only link it back to your product or service if it's the right person. So if you're selling sales software, I'm not going to be going after IT people. I'm not going to be going after the CTO, right? So that's specific for that. The next piece is company-based personalization. So think prospect based, now company. This is where you can get really interesting. All right. And here's a couple of examples of company based. So I can look at company news, press announcements, funding announcements. We can look at their company-based Twitter news announcements, leadership hires. So there's a number of areas that you can look at here. Competitors I love to use in prospecting. And there's a couple of different ways you can use competitors. One is within the subject line of the email. So let's just think here of subject line personalization. No one cares what you've written in the body of your email if you can't get them to open the email. The only way to get them to open the email is by having something half relevant in the subject line. One subject line personalization, a couple of subject line personalizations I really like to use that I've seen really good results from. One is CEO name and competitor name. So if I was going to prospect, again, not picking a super big company like a Google or something, but 2, 3, 500 employee company, putting in the CEO name and that person's first name. So I was a bit like, okay, I'm prospecting you, AJ. I'll put like Sarah Smith is your CEO, AJ in your name. So that's it. Using your first name, CEO first name, and the company name. That's personalization. That takes a little bit of research. You're going to get their interest. Why is my CEO name in this? You're going to get that open. So think about subject level personalization. Then you can go into the company-based or person-based. So like, how can I use company-based personalization now? So is there any latest news on that company? How can I tie that back to my product? So those are the kind of couple of areas there that I specifically am really keen on personalization.
Yeah, and I think you hit so many good points. If I had to pick one to pull out of that, I think talking about some of those individually personalizable things on LinkedIn, just speaking anecdotally, like I have things on my LinkedIn for anyone listening that says this is what I do. I have a couple recommendations on there. What you just said somebody could do would be super easy to do for me. Yet I don't get emails from prospects or from SDRs in my inbox saying like, hey, I saw that, AJ said this about you, wondering about that, nobody's looking at the recommendations. I'm not seeing anyone read my summary. So I'm curious, when an SDR is looking to start personalizing and start using some of these tactics, what needs to be their first sort of foundationally in order for them to take those steps to personalize their messages and reach out in I would say like a more respectful sense, but yeah, reach out with more of a mission to why they're being personalized and why they're reaching out.
Yeah, exactly. I think they've got it, that having that basis is having like 3 or 4 like go-to personalizations, and you've got to think about what channel as well. So if I'm going to reach out to you on how I reach out to you on LinkedIn will be completely different how I reach out to you on email. So like LinkedIn is a really good channel. So we take like, what are the 2 ways you can reach out, and 3 ways on LinkedIn, which is invites, in-mails / messages if they're connected, or what's becoming really popular is voice notes. So if you've connected with me, I can leave you a voice note. So think, okay, I've got like, if I was going to reach out to you in a really good way, I've got my 3 ways. Like if I'm going to send an invite, I'm not trying to sell to you on an invite. I'm just trying to get you to connect. Like, hey, this is my product or service. Can you take a meeting with me? Or the even more annoying ones, when they connect with you, they instantly send you that spam sales email.
The old pitch slap.
Yeah, and I every time I get one, I just block that person. I'm in sales, I get the hustle, I get there, but I'm just like, you're just doing a disjustice to everyone that like is in sales doing a proper job. So I think having that, like, what am I trying to work backwards? What am I trying to achieve? If I'm on LinkedIn, I'm sending a connection request. I'm just trying to get them to connect with me. So how am I going to do that? Is like, hey, Alex, I saw this. I was just reading your profile. I saw AJ wrote these great things about you. Really great to connect with you. That's it. So just working backwards. Then even on a first email, looking at that personalization. Am I looking to close them for a meeting on my first email? Realistically not, right? Some people do get that and it's great, but it's probably going to be email 2 or 3. You've got to think about multi-form, multi-channel, so probably some LinkedIn and a couple of emails, maybe a cold call. So everything you're doing is just like softening them. So don't like try and go for the close. Just think, how am I going to do this over like a period of time?
I think the big thing that I pulled from what you were saying is that, and maybe it's harsh to say, but like, hey, I'm not seeing a lot of it. Alex, to your point, you're not seeing a lot of it, is that there's not a lot of intention behind what people are doing when they say that they're personalizing their messaging, right? Like you said, I pulled in their company name and their job title. Like, isn't that personalization? Like, no, like you need to have that sort of staked in the ground end goal in mind when you're doing all of this. Like, I've said this a lot on previous podcasts, and I write about it a lot. Like, when you're selling something, if you're an SDR or an AE, you're really trying to help somebody, right? Like, you think that I can provide value to the prospect that I'm reaching out to. So your end goal should be, how can I help you? How can I prove that I can help you achieve XYZ goals, or overcome some challenges? And to do that effectively, you need to relay that message to them in a way that makes sense, whether it's in your first, second, third touch email, whether it's a connection request. Like, you have that end goal in mind when you reach out. So it's not just, hey, I saw, Gautam, that you worked at OneShot, or that, hey, we're both connected to Sean. Crazy, we should get in touch. Like, that doesn't really do it for a lot of people, right? Like, you can almost smell on the message that there's something lurking in the back where it's like, oh, I'm about to get pitched, or like, oh, this person's going to drop a message about something that I don't care about, right?
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because you have to like use your brain whilst you're doing this, and
My
it's hard.
brain, no. Oh, I don't like doing that.
Yeah, and it's tough. Like, my background, I've been in like B2B enterprise sales for 18. I started as an SDR, went into an AE, and then the last 12, 13 years built and scaled sales teams. And then starting my own company a year ago, I didn't have an SDR team. I didn't have a team of AEs. And we had a new product. And it was on me to build pipeline. It was on me to get meetings. And so I literally became an SDR again. And before we hired an SDR, I was pretty much using like our sequencing tools. I was connecting on LinkedIn. And like, at first I thought, oh, this is exciting. I'm looking forward to it. But it's draining. It's so hard to do it every single day. It's like, it can be fun for like 1 or 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're kind of like into hour 4 or 5 of doing a manual email task, and you're trying to personalize, you fatigue and you're cold calling. It becomes like, until you do it every single day, and maybe like, I'm a bit older now, so I'd have less energy than maybe when I was like a young pup, but it becomes like, so I get it. I get why people get lazy.
Mm-hmm.
Looking through someone's profile, there's nothing there. It's like 4 p.m. You've been working all day, and you just kind of, you just get lazy. I'm going to send a blank connection request, or I'm not going to personalize this email. And that happens, and that's natural. But just go back to, there's always something. You can quickly use like company news. You can find something on their profile, or, there's something on their company Twitter. You can find job postings. You can look on Glassdoor. There's always something. You always have like 5, 6, 10 go-to type of like personalizations. And again, just slow down. Again, if you're at the end of the day and it's not happening for you, just probably stop, like clock off, grab a beer, grab a coffee or whatever, and then it's like, go hard at it tomorrow or something.
Yeah, I think to that point, you painted a realistic scenario of like what it really is like to have to go through all of this versus what maybe, you hear in the ethosphere that is like LinkedIn, people talking about like, oh, you got to personalize, oh, you'll get XYZ results. Like, the reality of the situation is that it's not that easy. It's not always fun. But I think the one thing that really roots people and what you need in this whole process is a system. You need something to root yourself into day in and day out, so that even if you can't find something on someone's LinkedIn profile, like you said, you've got 4 or 5 backup sources you can go to try and pull something to make your message a bit more relevant, to cut through the noise and grab their attention. So on the topic of, I guess, process, I know that we talked about a lot of different components around like, these are the sources you can go to. These are the different channels you can use. There's a lot to juggle, a lot of plates to spin. What have you seen individual SDRs, AEs, salespeople use process-wise that's been incredibly effective versus what the scenario you just painted where it was like, I'm bored, I'll send a blank connection request or just a generic email and hope that it works?
Yeah. And I probably, this is probably the most overrated, overused word in sales these days, but I keep it, it's consistency. So firstly, what you'll always see the top performers doing is having that process, sticking to it and being consistent with it. So when we talk about process and we talk about, I would love to sit here and say, you know what, it's this process. It's LinkedIn connection request stage 1. It's email stage 2 with this level of personalization. Cold call stage, right? And that's different for every single person. But I would say going back to processes, people need to think about their individual process and don't be scared to like try different processes. So again, most people we talked about are using some form of sequencing tool today, whether that's an Outreach, a SalesLoft, a Groove, HubSpot. There's so many different types of sequencing. And if you're not using any of those, you can just use good old fashioned like Google Docs, right? Say, hey, this is what I'm going to use. But what you need to do is have like something that you're comfortable with. For me and what I've seen, so what's worked successfully within our organization is we are probably quite linked in. We target SDRs, right? So we target SDRs. We know SDRs, for us, they all live on LinkedIn. So we know, like, well, if I'm targeting a chief security officer, they're probably not on LinkedIn bragging about their commission check. I'm not saying SDRs or AEs are, but I'm joking. But for us, what we found working really well was multi-channel. So like, you also, it's not cold call heavy, it's not email heavy, it's not LinkedIn heavy. It's using multi-touch across those different channels. So, where we see works really well is LinkedIn as a first step, a connection request, a really quick personalized connection request. Having those, and then actually taking that to the next step, it's that first line personalization. So subject line and first line personalized, the rest can be templated. So you only have to personalize 20% of that first mail. That's it. So don't think that my sequence is 10 emails. I need to personalize 10 emails. Don't bother, right? What you need to do is just do some basic connection request personalization. Make sure you do some first line, first sentence personalization email. Now you've kind of got that in place, then it's sticking to your metrics. And I've seen this across the best AEs and the best SDRs. Is always working backwards from your targets. And like, I've seen this in action. I've been fortunate enough to work in like high growth sales organizations where the top AEs will make over $1 million a year. And I've seen them consistently do that year in, year out. And they all have a plan they work backwards from every year. And so if I take an AE example, I know my target may be $1 million for the year. And like, how many opportunities do I need to create them in? My average order value is 100K. So that means, I need to close 10 deals to hit my target. I know I only win 1 in 3 deals. So that means I have to have 30 deals in my pipeline to hit my $1 million target. So how do I get 30 deals in my pipeline? If I am like going to an SDR mode, I need to create 4 to 5 new meetings a month. Out of those 5 meetings, 1 will become an opportunity. So if I can add 1 opportunity there, if marketing can give me 1 opportunity, if I work closely with my SDR, how many opportunities do I need to create? So it's working backwards. And now if we take an SDR example, popular SDR target is 10 qualified meetings per month. How many calls do I need to make? And again, go back to how many prospects do you need to go after on a daily basis? A magic number I've seen work really well is 20 a day. And that's different for every single person. But I know internally we will say, I need to prospect 20 people per day. And if you actually break it down to 20 people a day, it's actually not as much work as you think it is.
Yeah, that's like not a huge number when you realistically think about it.
No, but if you work backwards from 10 meetings a month, people start going crazy. Like, I'm just going to start cold calling 50 people, and then I'm burnt out by 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about 20 prospects a day, I want to do 10 before lunchtime. And what does that mean? I want to get 10 new people into a sequence before lunchtime, which is 10 maybe email ones with one level of personalization, 10 invites sent. And if you stick to those 20 people every single day, and if you work backwards from your targets and you know those numbers, those are the best things you can do. So just working backwards from whatever your target, how many people a day, how many deals do I need? And those people, I've seen it for the last 20 years, always overachieve every single time.
It goes back to that thought on being intentional with everything, right? Like, I'm pulling in these 20 people because I know the numbers prove out in some capacity that I need to pull in at least 20 people to make sure that I hit my end goal, right? So there's even intention in that in terms of determining how many people you're pulling into your cadences. And I think I talked about it a little bit on your podcast actually, but how you're approaching these people. I know in this situation, we're talking about like all 20 of these people are getting some type of personalized message, right? Like that first touch, some component of it is very personal to them. And a lot of people think like, to your point, how am I going to do that to all of the accounts assigned to me? Like if I pull in 20 people, that's great, but maybe there's another 80 that are like sitting in a queue and marketing is barking at me saying, hey, why aren't these people getting touched yet? I think account tiering in this situation is huge, making sure that if you are adding in that layer of personalization, you're adding it into the people that make the most sense. Like they warrant the extra effort and work associated with it versus some people. Maybe they are some lower level marketing leagues that don't need a huge amount of personalization because they are webinar registrants, or that they figure ICP and they just need something industry focused or title focused that you can pull in there that is relevant to them, that doesn't require you to do a ton of extra lift on your side as an SDR. Again, just thinking about like, who am I reaching out to? Why am I reaching out to them? How personalized does this message have to be to grab their attention? All of that is sort of kicking around in your brain as you're going through this process.
Yeah. Like, and this is where like experience counts for a lot. We onboarded some new SDRs, zero experience, never been in sales before. And, it's difficult to understand, like once you've been doing the role for 6 months, 12 months, you kind of know, like by job title, this person's going to respond. This person will never respond to me. Like, we played around when we were starting out, going after SDRs, SDR leaders, VP of sales, CROs, sales ops. And we didn't know, we were using different messaging, but we know like actually we have our response rate to sales ops sucks. No one ever responds, but you need experience to know that. But you start picking up signals from like, actually, I know this type of message works, or actually this person, low response rate, low touch point. And the tiering system of this, like tier 1, high value targets, tier 2, tier 3, is so important. But you should have like that. You don't necessarily need that kind of clear, like it has to be within a company this size or this person. You can use like your brain. Again, it's using your brain, like looking at their profile, looking at their company, how long have they been at that company for, how many existing customers do we have within this space. So like, for example, we work with pretty much most of our company customers are software companies. And we do have like inbound coming in from like non-software companies, so pharmaceutical companies. We don't actively prospect into those industries at the moment. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't be, but we have such a high success rate in software companies. We know their tools they're using. We know the challenges they're facing. We know the terminology they're using, the MQLs, SQL. We know their boss is probably driving personalization. So we know that terminology. We'll spend our time there versus, pharmaceutical. We don't know their lingo. We don't know their terminology. We don't know our response rate. So again, it's understanding and picking those battles and where you spend that time as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I'm interested to talk just for a second a little bit more about the SDRs you've just onboarded and where personalization comes in within sort of the training and onboarding process with them. Because obviously you said they're green, sort of, no prior experience. So at what point do you make that jump from like, okay, here's what a sequence is, here's how to send an email, here's how to call someone on the phone? What point do you jump from really those basics into some of these personalization tactics and really getting them up to that next level as an SDR?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've seen this. I've probably hired, probably over 100 SDRs over the last like 7-8 years, and it's so difficult because, again, most of them have come with zero experience, straight out of college or a career change, or they've been in a different industry. And like, typically, I will wait probably for about a month. And the reason I say that is the first thing you need to get used to is, okay, what do we do as a company? You need to, if you start throwing in there like, hey, you need to do this bit of personalization, that's kind of like intermediate level. What I like to see, and the first thing I like to see them doing, like, I won't name and shame anyone from my team on this call because it's fine. I was probably, actually, it's definitely worse than all of them. But they don't know how to send, like, new SDRs. Sending a calendar invite is something that they've never done before. And for me, it sounds crazy. I'm like, how do you not know how to send a calendar invite? And then you're like, of course, why would you ever send a calendar invite before you're in a corporate environment? Setting up a Zoom. And I know things that people are probably more familiar with them now than because of the pandemic, but I think I'd like to get people comfortable, onboarding. What do we do as a company, first of all? Why would someone even use us? So understanding, firstly, from a prospect side, do I even understand, before I get into sequencing and mails and cold calling, do I genuinely understand what I do as a company? Not just the regurgitated spiel from the website. I'm talking like, do I really understand what I come, being naturally inquisitive. Do we help? Okay, we help SDRs. How do we help them? They're sending manual emails. They're taking 20 minutes to research them. Okay, why is that painful? Because they have to do it 10, 15 times a day. Sometimes there's no information there. Okay, cool. So they're doing that every single, So you're really understanding what your prospect's life is like. Once they kind of understand that, then I kind of let them say, cool, send your own email. Don't even bother with the sequencing now. And I let them produce an email. Something that probably should take them 5 minutes will take them 4 hours. And it normally sucks as well. It's normally like 500 words with 3 pages. And they've kind of written a dissertation. And that's the best way to learn. And then they read, and then you kind of like, hey, let's break it down. You've done some really good research here. But let's be honest, they're not going to open the email. These guys are getting 20, 100 emails a week. And then once they start getting familiar then with the pitch, the emails, they get excited because they get a few opens for the first time, but no one ever responds. But you think the way they were celebrating with that open, that it's a response or it's even a meeting. And then once you work through that process of like, okay, we're through this, we're familiar with the tools. I'm not expecting any meetings in that first 2-3 weeks. It's what do we do as a company? Who are we targeting? Why is it important to them? Getting those cadences and sequences up. Then we start looking at those messages. And then what I like to do is then start bringing in some relevant personalization after about a month. And a really funny exercise to do is comparing that first email that they drafted with the email that they've created like 6 weeks later. And then they can see it for themselves. Oh my, what was I thinking? Why was I doing that? No one's ever going to read that mail. And then even taking that email at week 6 and comparing it with week 12, week 24, it's evolving. Those messages that work for you today, everyone's done it. They'll create a killer message, tons of opens, loads of responses. That same message will not work in 3 months. I cannot tell you why not. It doesn't make sense, but it just does not. You need to evolve your messaging. You need to constantly get better. But yeah, it's a really good question. But yeah, it's different for every single person.
Yeah. I like the way that you broke that down though, like thinking about what you need to have in place before you can even start to think about doing any of this, because it's been so almost like shoved down our throats that like you have to do this, right? Like you have to personalize or else. And then you onboard a new SDR and they're like, yeah, I don't know how to send a calendar invite. Like, what do you expect from me here? So thinking about like all of this stuff that needs to go in place beforehand and making sure that reps are properly set up to do this before they even think about doing it is so important. There's a whole nother podcast topic available there in terms of like burning and churning out reps and getting people on the phones before they're ready and all that stuff that I'm sure we could spend hours on. But it's this like idea that maybe just take a step back, right? Like we all know it's important. You as a sales leader know that it's important and that your team has to be doing this, but you can't just throw them into the deep end of the pool and expect them to understand. You have to spend the time to make sure that they're properly set up to do any of this stuff before they jump in. Otherwise, it could be a mess.
Yeah, you kind of know what I think like now, like you say, everyone's just thrown in. There's enablement teams at every single company now. This is our 8-week formal onboarding. Here's your free swag. This is why we're the great company. And then it's like, here's your sequences. Use this sequence for this. It's become very prescriptive. Well, actually, if you think about the fundamentals, and this like the fundamentals of selling is understanding your customer. One thing that like I do not think enough SDRs do when they start is just listen to other sales calls. They're overwhelmed, right? This is their first job in software. And I don't know anything about software. I don't know anything about my like chosen job. You hear all these people on the phone who've been there 5 years, oh, I'm way out of my depth here. Imposter syndrome kicks in, everything. One of the most like underutilized things is just listening to other people's calls. And actually, it's great when you first start a new role because you can just listen. People can introduce you onto the call and say, hey, this is Gautam, he's brand new, he's just listening in. People like get it. Everyone was new at a job for the first time. And you can just sit there and just watch, and you can watch like maybe a senior AE or a sales leader or a senior SDR. You can see what questions they're asking. And then at the end of that call, it's like, oh, why were you asking that question? Because I noticed that the prospect lit up and they started really opening up about their problems and pains. And that's prospecting gold, because what you've just heard is a real life customer's face lighting up when you've talked about like, I bet you it sucks sending 50 emails a day and getting no responses. And then your boss is telling you need to personalize more. Like, yeah, they don't get it. And I try doing these things, but they don't work. And I try, and just hearing that firsthand, that's like the experience you need to start building those messages versus send this message to this person at this time. That doesn't work unless you fundamentally understand why.
That's a good point. Yeah, like playbooks are great, but they're static. They can't talk to you. They just show you what has worked for some people, and yeah, if you follow it, maybe you'll see success. But more often than not, yeah, you're just kind of entering as a cog in the machine in that situation. But yeah, oh, it's like having the technology now too with like Gong and Chorus and all of these tools that allow you to listen back to other people's successful calls and like understand why it was, like you said, why they lit up at this moment or like why they resonated with this value prop. SDRs have it good compared to when I started, when you started, when Alex started. I didn't have any of this stuff.
Yeah.
One thing that you did bring up that I wanted to sort of end the conversation on is the idea that to really get this, to as an SDR, to really understand how to personalize something, how to make it relevant to their prospect, you have to walk in their shoes. You have to really understand them. And there's this phrase that's being coined, show me you know me. How can you prove to a prospect that I understand your pains, your challenges, I can help you overcome them? There's a lot to the points that you've made before, a lot of data to comb through, a lot of articles to read, a lot of podcasts to listen to and videos to watch that allow you to get that sense of who your prospect is. But it can be cumbersome, like we talked about. I know you're trying to solve for a lot of that with OneShot, but I guess I'd like to hear your thoughts on what the future of personalization looks like. Like, we know what it looks like now. We know how important it is. Look ahead to the next like 3 or 5 years in the future. What are we doing that's the same? What are we doing that's different? What can SDRs start doing today to maybe get a bit ahead of the curve and start to see some future success earlier rather than lag behind?
Yeah, yeah, and the future of like SDRs is so exciting. I think, like we touched on now, it wasn't regarded as like a proper job like
Hmm.
5-10 years
Yeah.
ago. It wasn't,
You're
but
just an
now
admin. Yeah.
yeah, it really was. It was like, yeah, we've got these leads building up for marketing. We need someone to follow up on them. Now it's like SDRs are like, they are the future salespeople. There's now really good progression within organizations to become an AE, to become an SDR leader, to go into enablement. These never existed. Like they never existed. It was like, yeah, whatever. You make your dials and get your meetings. Now, like as we progress, it's become a sophisticated, rewarding role. But what this has also created is created this buyer prospect saturation, where great SDRs are becoming more highly skilled than ever, they're getting more rewarded than ever, but you've got to understand buyers are getting more frustrated with the unsolicited emails, the cold calling. You know, if we look fast forward to a few years, I think you're going to get into more, and we're seeing it now, right? Where emails are bouncing, emails are getting blocked, links in emails are getting taken out as well. Where we're heading to is, personalization is a given. Like you have to personalize. Like there is no option. That static, automated 6 email stage sequence is that those days are over. Right? It makes me sad because I was successful using those. Like, so I'm upset more than anyone. Those days are over though. We have to look at multi-stage, multi-format, multi-channel sequencing now. And you have to personalize this, but you have to do this at scale. So where I think the future is going is, how can we quickly personalize across multi-channel? How can we personalize our cold calling? How can we have a bespoke script? I'm about to speak to AJ. What have I got there? So within, like, when you're thinking about prospecting, when you're thinking about a person, have a way to research them in a really quick way. Research them in a really quick way, looking at their company, their person. Have your like 5 to 10 areas. And then think about when you can use funding announcements, or when you can use a leadership quote, or if they're a new starter at a company. Really think about where you can implement those nuggets of information. Right now, companies go really heavy on email stage 1, personalization, first sentence. This will have to evolve into email stage 2, email stage 3, connection requests, social. So really think about that. That's going to be a huge part. So start thinking multi-channel, multi-touch. Where can I just inject these small pieces of personalization to that? How can I make it relevant? If you're prospecting a finance customer, how can I include the right case studies for that? I'm not going to send a retail case study to a pharmaceutical or a finance customer. And then I think that the going into the final piece is becoming an art. People are looking into, and actually we're doing this, what are the best subject lines? What are the best open rates for those subject lines? What are the best by persona as well? So really taking the time to like understand who you're going after, what channels to approach them on, those types of things, researching in a quick way, those types of things, the better system you can have for researching someone in a really quick way, so you can get 5 to 10 nuggets of information on that person. If you can get that down over the next kind of few years and you can start using that, I think you'll be in a really good place.
Well said. Yeah, I think we had talked about it on a previous episode, the idea that, I mean, technology is not coming for any SDR's jobs. If you just click a button and send out a sequence and hope to get leads, yes, technology is coming for your job. But to your point, if you think and you're strategic about the role, there's no AI that can replace you. only technology that can enable you to do the job more effectively. And I agree with you. I think the future of personalization is making sure that SDRs get the information that they need, the most crucial pieces to use in their messaging, delivered to them faster and more efficiently, so they can then turn that around and make it relevant to the message that they're sending out to their prospect. So I think we're on the same path here.
Yeah. And I think it's and that consistency, that 20 a day, 10 a day, whatever rate, like, system you have in place, like, stick to it. But the fundamentals will always be just understanding your customer. You can't be replaced by technology. If you've listened to 50 calls, 100 calls by your customer, you understand. I always think like back, maybe a few years ago, we were, again, fortunate enough to be part of a team. We closed a $9 million deal with I think the largest bank in the US. I remember sat face to face with the CTO of the bank, who had 200,000 developers rolling into him. And then you sit there face to face in the prep that goes into those meetings, right? It's a 30-minute meeting, but with probably 25, 30 meetings, internal meetings that have gone before that. Like, speaking to that level, if you can understand your customer, their day-to-day challenges, who they report into, who's making their life difficult, that all comes into prospecting, right? Because having lived that, how to use that messaging, your prospects pain.
Love it. Gautam, thanks so much for hopping on the show. I know I've certainly covered this topic at length. We've covered it on Unsubscribe before. I've talked about it a bunch, but I think it's so crucial and important for SDRs to really understand and kind of pull the curtain back a little bit on what personalization really is, some of the stuff that you have to have foundationally before you can even start doing it. So I think you painted a pretty detailed picture for anyone out there who's looking to dive into this world. If people want to learn more from you, get in touch with you, learn more about OneShot, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I absolutely loved it as well. I think you can pretty much go to our website, OneShot.ai, and what we do is we enable personalization at scale for salespeople. So we carry out the research on the prospects for you, all within your workflow: prospects, news stories, funding announcements. Do we create you the entire killer message that's going to get you a meeting? Absolutely not. What we do is we enable you with all of the research, so you can use that messaging, make it your own, and then go from there. But yeah, happy to run any demos or get some trials going if anyone was interested. But yeah, really enjoyed the conversation today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again for being here. We enjoyed it as well. Alex, do you have any last words before we sign off?
No, I really appreciate it. I mean, I think the more we talk about personalization, AJ, on this podcast, the more, important it seems to be, and you can see everything trending that way. So it's really cool that, we got to speak with you, Gautam, and learn a little bit about your, on the side, we did do a little bit of learning about OneShot. It's a really cool tool to be able to, like you said, really get you most of the way there, help you with that research, and then let the SDR sort of put that last touch on it to make it their own.
Got to use your brain, people.
Yeah, unfortunately, we still have to use them. Yeah, I hate it as much as everyone else, but yeah, we still have to use them, unfortunately.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here, Gautam. Remember to subscribe to Unsubscribe to get more episodes like this in your inbox, get some sales dev best practices and insights, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of Unsubscribe, the Demand Drive podcast. If you want less of those nasty unsubscribe emails in your inbox, go ahead and check out some of the content we have to the left, and make sure that you subscribe to Unsubscribe to keep your SDR team in tip-top shape.